All right, today we're going to talk about the top things I learned in 16 years of natural bodybuilding. It is really weird to say that out loud, but 16 years, here we are. This will be presented in tier fashion, so it will let you know sort of how I prioritize things. We're going to start in the F tier, which doesn't mean something is useless or unvaluable. It's just sort of at the bottom of the rung, and then we're going to work our way back up all the way to the tippy top to the S tier, so stick around to the end for that. Let's get to the episode. All right, beginning in the F tier, high rep training for cutting, low rep training for bulking. So why is this in my F tier? I think it's something we naturally sort of lean into, or it's one of those sort of bodybuilding myths or cliches. Just, you are beginning to cut for the first time and you're looking for some heuristics and small things to latch onto that are going to help you be more effective whenever you are training. And we see in a lot of the old bodybuilding magazines, just a lot more high rep training going on whenever some of these bodybuilders were cutting. And so we naturally latch onto things like that. And then on the opposite end of that, powerlifters, I mean, there's some huge guys. And so you sort of latch on to that high load, low rep training whenever you are bulking. In reality, somewhere in the middle, whenever you're training, is probably the answer, especially in terms of bodybuilding. So if you are exposing yourself to anywhere from the 5 to 30 rep range, I think you are doing yourself a good service because you are not limiting yourself to just the low loads or just the high loads while you are training. And since we know that training volume is largely correlated with muscle growth, whatever you can do to expose your muscles to the most amount of volume, which means managing fatigue by sort of varying your rep ranges. You don't just want to sit there and do a lot of high load, low rep training because that's going to mess with your joints and connective tissues and things like that. And then on the other end of things, it is so much harder. Well, I don't know how much harder, but it's going to be a little bit harder to gauge sort of reps in reserve whenever you are at the sort of top end of the rep ranges, like, in the 20 to 30 rep range. Like if you're at rep 29, do you really only have one more in you? I mean, can you really gauge with fidelity and accuracy, whether or not you have 1 rep in reserve or 2 rep in reserves, the closer you are to 30. So I think exposing ourselves to a wide range of rep ranges, whether we are bulking, cutting, maintaining, is probably more optimal than choosing one or the other for specific purposes. Next thing in the F tier, targeted fat loss. I think we hear this all the time. If you want to lose body fat in your midsection, maybe you do more crunches, maybe use a waist trainer or something like that to spot target belly fat. The best thing that I learned about fat loss along this journey is that, one, we all have different genetics, we all have different phenotypes, and we are all predisposed to carry body fat in different areas of our body. So for me, I carry sort of in my upper quad and low back a little bit more than I do in my stomach. So as I'm approaching a contest state, like my upper body minus my low back is going to look much farther along than like my lower body. So I know that in the last leg of a cutting phase, like it's just gonna, it's gonna be my upper glutes, my upper quads, and maybe a little bit of low back that fat is going to come off. And that no matter what I do, I'm not going to be able to specifically target my low back with like some, back raises or more reverse hypers or anything like that. Your fat is going to come off where your body chooses for it to come off. And the only thing you can do, the thing you want to control, is your calorie deficit and the amount of volume of training and the amount of cardio you're doing. And those are the things in your control. Don't focus on spot reduction. Focus on your overall calorie deficit and your overall energy expenditure. That's going to be much more effective for fat loss in the long run. Moving on to our D tier. Number 1, you must eat every 2 to 3 hours. Now, I think first starting out, like this is a great heuristic to have, just because I think we're also used to, like, if you're, again, this is sort of a beginner thing, beginner to transitioning into intermediate or early stage person who is interested in bodybuilding, eating more frequently is going to be better. It's going to help you get your protein in. It's going to help you learn various satiety signals and things like that. And it's going to help you learn how to make meal compositions, a variety of veggies, carbohydrates, proteins, various different fats. So I think a higher meal frequency teaches you a lot of great skills. But I think we take it too far in one direction or another because we start thinking about like, well, okay, so I need to eat every 2 hours. And when you think about it, like if you ate every 2 hours, the normal person, the average person, they are up for what, like 16 hours of the day? Are you going to eat 8 times? Are you going to have like 5 meals and 3 snacks? No, definitely not that. And then you just sort of bump that down to like every 3 hours. That's not really that, well, optimal. either. It's closer. And if you're eating every 3 hours, I mean, that's better than every 2 hours. However, you have to ask yourself, is that actually fitting into your lifestyle? So what I learned here is I think if you eat anywhere from 3 to 6 meals a day and it fits into your schedule, that being the most important thing, for me right now, 3 meals a day, possibly a fourth meal, fits into my schedule. Training days, 4 meals. Off days, 3 meals. Work days, 3 meals. That's the way it usually fits into my schedule right now. So meal timing, as long as you hit a certain threshold, and I think that bottom end threshold is around 3 meals. Can you maintain off of fewer meals than that? Can you eat in sort of a time restricted window that is smaller than that? Yeah, I think you can maintain, but are you making your most optimal muscle gains? Are you able to retain your muscle mass? I'm not so sure. So 3 to 6 meals, if it fits in your schedule, as opposed to sort of rigidly, you must get your meals in every 2.5 hours, every 3 hours, being flexible, not adhering to extremely rigid rules. Second thing in this tier, protein must be consumed immediately post-workout. So I think the thing I learned over the course of these 16 years, that the most important thing, and some of you may have heard this before, is total protein intake for the day. I think if you are getting anywhere from 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight, you are in the sweet spot and you are doing it right. So as opposed to looking at just your windows around your workout, which are very important, and you should sort of preferentially place some food before and after your workouts, but it doesn't have to be absolutely immediately after you work out. Like, you don't have to pound a shake after your last set of a particular exercise. Otherwise, you're going to lose something. Half hour, 45 minutes, I think that is perfectly fine. And so overall protein intake is the most important thing, in my opinion. Last one in the D tier, eating carbs at night, eating at night in general. This is not going to make us fat. I think early on in anybody's sort of bodybuilding and or sort of fitness transformation career, you think about, okay, so what are the things I want to optimize? Again, this sort of goes back to meal timing. And, some people say, some trainers say that if you eat at night, you're going to preferentially store those things as fat. Again, this goes back to how many calories are you taking in? How many meals are you taking in? And for me, meal timing at night really comes down to, is that meal going to affect the sleep that you're going to be getting? If you are able to sleep well, if you do not have some sort of violent acid reflux in the amount of time since you last ate to the time you go to bed, you are probably going to be okay if all your calories are accounted for. So if you hit your sort of calorie balance for the day, if you're in a deficit, if you're at 2,500, you hit the 2,500 and your last sort of 500 or 600 come an hour and a half before bed, and you're able to sleep appropriately, probably not going to do much of anything. So carbs and fats before bed, not going to add to your fat mass in any considerable way, especially if you are on point with your calories and protein throughout the day and throughout the week. C tier, tracking progress. Tracking progress is good. It's great. I think we all sort of lean into it. Track your calories, track your macros, your proteins, carbs, fats, you track your weight, and then it sort of snowballs from there. Once you've accumulated some muscle, what else can you track? We want to get into bod pods and DEXAs. We want to look at sort of bioelectrical impedance. We want to do calipers. We want to do before and after pictures. But I think if you check out 3DMJ, they have a good sort of stance on this. And I think, a lot of other trainers sort of have a very similar stance. I think the closer you get to a competition, the more variables you want to track, and that will be more valuable to making meaningful change. Like if you are several weeks out from a competition, I think pictures are going to be that much more valuable. They're going to be more valuable than scale weight anyways. Once you are lean enough, calipers, bioelectrical impedance, DEXA, bod pod, doesn't really matter. It really is about how you are looking before you step on stage, and it doesn't matter how much you weigh. As you get closer to a competition, as you get closer to a time, you're going to the beach, this or that, pictures are going to be more valuable. Possibly some of those other sort of more fine-grained ways of measuring progress are going to be more valuable as you get closer to your date, whatever the competition is. However, whenever you are done, I think sort of reversing out of that as well was the thing that I learned. Like, you don't need to track everything once you are a month out from your competition, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. And much like you can periodize your nutrition, you can periodize the way you track so that you are not constantly trying to keep up with a lot of variables. If you are tracking your weight in the off season and you have a general idea of where you would like your body fat to be based on the way you look, I think you're doing a great job. So tracking is awesome. However, it needs to be more fine-grained the closer you get to competition, and then you can reverse out of that, much like your diet. Last thing in C tier, supplements. You need all the supplements. If some is good, more is better. This is very much like a Vegeta mentality. You know, he went into the hyperbolic time chamber, came back out, and, you know, well, why not? Why not just go back in? Well, because there are things that are going to restrict your progress if you go back into the hyperbolic time chamber and just try and accumulate more and more and more of the same thing. So what I mean by this is, we supplement with protein, we supplement with creatine. A lot of people take a pre-workout. And then as, for me, coming from the natural bodybuilding realm, we, especially early on, it's just like, oh, how do I maximize my testosterone or this or that? What do I need to take supplement-wise within the confines and regulations of whatever organization I'm competing in that will allow me to optimize those things. However, there is not a ton of literature on all these, especially like new supplements. There is not a body of literature that supports a lot of these supplements. Like if you look at something like creatine, there are studies on creatine, and there is a body of literature which contains lots of studies having to do with creatine monohydrate specifically. So that is a supplement with a large body of literature behind it, unlike some of these other things which have maybe they have specific studies, maybe they have specific animal studies, but it is not a body of literature. So be careful with the supplements that you are taking. One, because they could be banned in certain organizations. And two, you probably don't need them, and they're probably not getting you what you want. If you were taking a protein to fill in the gaps, if you were taking creatine, if you've got a multi in there, if you want to go as far as like a fish oil or a D supplement if you're deficient, all good things. And then additionally, if you want to sort of offload some of that burden of decision-making, International Society of Sports Nutrition, and that will give you sort of a list of supplements that they recommend based on the research. And I think that's a great list, and I might even put that up here. B tier. Number one thing in the B tier, gaining weight too slow in a bulking phase will leave you frustrated. Gaining weight too fast will leave you having to cut too frequently. So I think the thing for me here is balancing the rate of muscle gain and fat accumulation is something that you're going to have to experiment with. Number one, people operate at various body fat levels differently. Some people can get away with sort of high single-digit body fats for the entire year and functionally feel fine. Some people need to be at higher levels of body fat to feel fine. How do I gauge this for myself? Am I sleeping well? Is my sex drive intact? Are my energy levels doing good? Am I hungry in between meals? If I can check off all those boxes, then that lets me know that I'm at least eating enough. And when I look at myself in the mirror, am I at a body fat that would be appropriate for the point in the season in which I am at? I think for me, something that I like to do is I like to stay in like the 12 to 15 range on the top end. So whenever I'm gaining into that range, and then I'm either mini cutting out or I am doing a slightly more prolonged fat loss phase. Like right now, I'm in the middle of a mini cut. And so that'll end in like a week. And then I'll take a week off from training while I'm at the beach. And then I'll come back to it, start at maintenance calories, and gradually work my way up into a gaining phase for another 2-3 months. And then I'll go on my sort of prolonged diet to sort of prep for next year. Being cognizant of how fast we are gaining is one of the most important things that I learned. So number one, figure out where you operate comfortably, like sort of what is the sort of top end range that you feel comfortable. Well, looking, and how does your training feel at that range? And then be aware of what that looks like sort of in the mirror. And then make sure you're not gaining too fast from week to week. Like I think if you're gaining at 0.25% a week and you are gaining that regularly, I think that is a good clip to be at. Might be a little quick, might have to slow it down for yourself, but find the speed that works for you. And if you aren't piling on, if you're not like gaining a percent a week or something like that, that's a little fast for my taste, then you can probably be sure that what you're gaining is going to be muscle mass with as limited body fat as is possible for you. Moving on to the A tier, find a hobby outside of bodybuilding. I think the thing that sort of gets overlooked is that for the sport of bodybuilding, the people who are drawn to it really enjoy it, and they understand that it is a year-round sport. And when you are in a year-round sport, when you have various phases to training, whenever what you do the year before absolutely impacts the competition year the next year, you might put all of your focus into that and sort of put other things to the wayside that are valuable. So I think finding a hobby that allows you to sort of get away from bodybuilding is going to be a very powerful thing. I think we turn so much into training, into diet and nutrition. And then a lot of people are coaches and, and they're on social media and they are so wrapped up in this lifestyle that they forget that there are other things that they could be doing. Start a fantasy football league. As a matter of fact, find a hobby that you can do in person with other people. Volunteer, go to Habitat for Humanity, build houses, find something that you can do outside of bodybuilding that sort of lights up other areas of your life, possibly with more social contact. That way you can have something in case you need to step away from the sport for a while. Like for me, for the past 10 years, I've been working on my education. I've had to sort of take a step back and sort of be off stage. And so my focus was my education and my family. So taking time out for hobbies, not that my family's a hobby or anything like that, but taking time out to find various hobbies that you enjoy. For me, it's, creating these videos. This is a hobby. This is something that I enjoy doing. And so this is something that I do. Could it be more social? Absolutely. I have friends who do similar things. So we chat about stuff like this. So outside of bodybuilding, this is one of my hobbies. So find something you can do outside of bodybuilding because bodybuilding will be here. However, you may not always have the ability to bodybuild in the way you want. And when you step away from the sport, you might realize, oh shit, I didn't cultivate anything else. So cultivate other hobbies and interests. Very powerful stuff. This is another A-tier thing, and it is highly related to sort of cultivating hobbies, but it is socializing. Again, it's a cliche, but bodybuilding is a lonely sport. Well, I think it's a lonely sport if we make it a lonely sport. If you're willing to stretch and make yourself feel more uncomfortable, I mean, we're all used to making ourselves uncomfortable in the gym. The most uncomfortable thing we can do to ourselves outside of that is, hey, going out and getting a meal with somebody, going out and planning an outing or event, I don't know, disc golf or something like that. But socializing, I think we are prone to sort of put to the back burner in lieu of our goals because, you have to go out there and you have to grind and you have to go and achieve your goals and achieve the things that you want to do. And all that stuff is great. But as Thomas Sowell says, there are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. So the more you put into bodybuilding, I have no doubt you will get a ton out of it. But you are trading off on some social time, which we know is also very important for our mental health. So as you see, we go along this A tier and S tier, we'll have some mental health related things in there from a sort of biopsychosocial lens. Whenever we are thinking about mental health, you have the biology and underlying physiology and just, what we put into our bodies. This could have to do with sleep, any medications a person's taking, the weight training you're undertaking, the psychology, the thoughts and the sort of feelings that drive thoughts and certain behaviors, any sort of automatic thoughts or limiting beliefs into the psychology there. And then there is the social aspect of it. I think we think about optimizing in the biological and psychological realms of things, but we forget that we are social creatures. So one of the A-tier things that I realized along the way is that I need social support. We all need social support, and it's not just social support for our endeavors. That's really one-sided. It is our ability to provide social support for other people, our ability to cultivate friendships, and to sort of self-transcend. I'm going to do an episode here on Maslow in a little bit, but the tippy top of his pyramid, I think we all are familiar with, self-actualization. What we don't often think about is that Maslow had some unpublished works, and the reworked pyramid at the top of the pyramid, it wasn't self-actualization, which I think we're all sort of striving for. We think we get on stage and that's, we'll be self-actualized. We get to the Yorton or to the Olympia or to WMBF Worlds or whatever it is. We think that's self-actualization and it's going to make us feel a certain way. But the tippy top of Maslow's pyramid, or what it should have been, maybe not should, but could have been, was self-transcendence. And I think once we stop taking sort of this internal look at what is going to self-actualize me and sort of take this external, what can I do for others, that is something that is going to make you a happy, healthier athlete. So A-tier skill, possibly S-tier skill, find ways to keep, maintain, and grow your friendships. Here we are finally at the S tier. So number 1 skill, number 3 skill, whatever it is, a skill in the S tier. Nothing beats 16 years of consistently iterating the process. 5 years, 10 years, 16 years for me. That's why I said 16. It's not a magical number, but iterating the process. What does that mean? So if you were an artist, let's say you are a sculptor, would you be taking like these huge sort of chunks off? Maybe at the beginning, yes, because you can make a lot of progress in the beginning, but once you get farther into the progress, you are not going to want to make these huge drastic changes. It's going to be about refining the process, and this is about making small changes, small meaningful changes that you can track on the day to day. And eventually, once you have optimized certain aspects of training, nutrition, mindset, it's going to be even smaller than that. So you're not going to be sort of that Kaizen, or that concept of Kaizen, that 1% better every day. It might be a 0.5% better every day. It might be 0.25% better every day. And once you get to the sort of tippy top of the game, if you're optimizing for bodybuilding, let's say, you might be getting 0.01% better every day. Iterating is a process of refinement. And my favorite kind of iteration is it's called deliberate practice. You should check out Anders Ericsson and his book Peak, also RIP Anders Ericsson. In that book, he outlines a method for iteration called deliberate practice that a lot of high performers use. And it involves, finding a coach, getting immediate feedback, and various other things that help you refine the process along the way. As you get further along in your fitness journey, in your natural bodybuilding journey, and your bodybuilding journey in general, you are going to want to get more fine-grained with your process, which leads us to our next skill in the S tier: habits, systems, identity. So this idea comes from Atomic Habits by James Clear, which he draws on a lot of psychology, a lot of cognitive psychology. The sooner that you can develop habits, the sooner that you can take those habits and develop systems, and the more consistently that you apply those habits and systems over long periods of time, eventually you are going to get to identity. Now, identity is a very powerful thing, and we can all adopt various identities, various roles that we take on, and they can be very powerful. They can be positive, they can be negative, but they can be powerful. Like for me, one of the identities that I adopt is a dad. That is a powerful identity for me. It is a role that I take on. It is a role that I could shirk if I wanted to. Like, there are some people who, even though they have children, they don't take on that identity. For me, it is the best thing that I have done in life. And so it is a role, it is an identity that I have adopted, and it is an identity because it is an intrinsic part of who I am to the core. And so I take on all the systems and habits of being a dad, and I don't have to think about them. I don't have to sort of plan them. They just sort of exist. It's still a process that I'm refining, but the habits and systems are in place and getting better day to day. Similarly, with fitness and bodybuilding, the first step in the journey is developing habits. So you want to start eating more protein. Okay, good habit. Protein at every meal. Eating fibrous veggies. Great, good habit. Have something veggie-wise at each meal. Start adding a serving of fruit here and there. Look to incorporate complex carbohydrates. Look to expand into multiple meals a day. Great habits. Awesome. Systems that you have in place. Meal preparation. Prepping your meals on certain days of the week, Sundays and Wednesdays. Do you have meal preps on those days? Other sort of systems that you can have in place. Have I decided sort of the major events that are blocked out in my calendar so that I can plan around that? So a system of time blocking or other things like that to make accomplishing your goals in and out of the gym easier. So developing the systems. And then eventually, identity, you go from I bodybuild to I'm a bodybuilder. Like, that's it. It is a part of your identity. It is ingrained. And a lot of those habits and systems are automated at that point. And that's what we are sort of shooting to do. So you want to add the habits, develop the systems, and then adopt the identity. And that way, a lot of these things that we are shooting to do are automated. And when people sort of adopt an identity, something that I come back to is just like, when you're talking to a Christian friend or a Muslim friend or a Jewish friend, and you ask them what they're doing on Sunday or another holy day, whatever the holy days are, I'm not that familiar. You ask them what they're doing, they are like, oh, going to church, going to the mosque, going to the synagogue. That's what they do. That's what they do on their particular holy day. It's not something they have to think about. It is ingrained in their identity, and that is sort of the best way to have these habits and systems ingrained in us, is to adopt this identity. So once you are far enough along in, eventually, and you might not even realize that it's happened, but in your circle of friends, like, you're the fitness person, you're the bodybuilding person. And that is a powerful thing because identities are much harder to break than just little habits and systems. Last thing in the S tier, number one thing, and it builds off of sort of the habits, systems, and identity, shifting our mindset from an outcome orientation to a process orientation. The most powerful thing I learned in 16 years of natural bodybuilding. So what do I mean by shifting from an outcome orientation to a process orientation? A lot of you may already do this. However, I think this is the most important thing I learned in my time as a natural bodybuilder. Currently, still, natural bodybuilder. Having goals is a great way to get started. However, having goals isn't a way to maintain a lifestyle, especially in a sport like bodybuilding, where your seasons are so long and you are sort of in this constant cycle of either gaining, maintaining, or cutting. It almost feels like there's no off season sometimes. And sometimes the goals can feel sort of amorphous. So shifting from an outcome orientation, because there's not always going to be a competition that year. I mean, I guess there could be. I guess, you know what? I mean, if you're living your best life and you got a ton of cash and you can compete multiple times a year and, you're in your 40s, you're not having to worry about gaining so much, as far as muscle mass goes, and you can just kind of stay lean year round, then yeah, by all means, hey, live your best life, do your thing. You're always going to have a goal. But for some of us who might have to take breaks, who might have to go back to school, who might have to raise a family, focusing on the process is going to be much more powerful than just focusing on an outcome. There is so much more to you than fitness and bodybuilding. And I think embracing certain aspects of the process being just the day-to-day, the little bit victories, the 1% better, the 0.5% better, the 0.01% better, focusing on adopting habits and systems that facilitate all the goals that you're sort of shooting for, and making sure that those habits and systems and that identity that you adopt can apply whenever those external rewards of competition, being on stage, getting medals, making sure that those overlap sort of in the Venn diagram of things with the life that you want to live outside of the sport is the best thing that I have done. A lot of the habits and systems that I developed while natural bodybuilding helped me make this YouTube channel. Help me connect and talk with you all. And I'm very grateful for that. So embrace the process. Have goals. Have goals. Goals are great motivators, and they are a good way to start a lifestyle, but they are no way to finish a lifestyle. And focusing on the process or the way in which you're engaging in an activity is going to be much more powerful in the long term. And that's what I would like for you all to think about. Long term, not short term, not acute. What do you want out of this in the end of all things? Alrighty, that was the end of the tier list. So if you found that helpful, please shoot me a like. Actually, you know what? Don't hit the like button. Give me a comment. I love talking with you all. So really appreciate you being here. And if you like more of this stuff, check out this next episode where we will go into a mental skill that you can apply to bodybuilding, much like the previous episode on sort of mindfulness. And if you haven't, check that one out too. And I just want to say, I really appreciate you all for watching, and I will catch you next time.